Hi, everybody. Welcome to Political Crossroads. It's Saturday, 9th of May, 2020. Not sure how much that matters anymore.
It's all the same.
Yeah. We've had an interesting week here. Oh, sorry. We're here with, good morning, Ernesto. Good morning, Eduardo. We've got
Morning.
Eduardo
Morning,
here.
guys.
You guys are just going to hear his voice and see his wonderful profile picture there. So, which is just fine to reassure that we don't have bandwidth issues or internet connection issues, and that we can get this done. Just a quick rundown on what's been going on this week. There's lots. This becomes more and more of a political, what do you call it, a soap opera, I guess. As we were talking about last week, Ernesto, it keeps getting better. It keeps getting better. And this has not been Miss Janina Agnes's week, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as she's concerned either, I imagine. In summary, we've seen between Monday and Friday, pretty much, the following. You've got the case of the Bolivian Air Force aircraft being used in two different occasions for basically for personal favors to friends and family of top government officials, people directly tied to the president or her ministers, which is obviously widely criticized and looked down upon, being that was one of the major criticisms against the previous government, the Mas government, that loved to use government transport for non-official reasons. We've seen the head of the YPFB, the National Hydrocarbons Company, be destituted. So we're on our third. I guess that would put us on our third president for YPFB since Agnes took office. Basically, as far as I understand, because of questionable contracts that they've signed, corruption. Tata Quispe, our dear manager of the Fondioc, the Indigenous Fund, and as we were kind of joking before we went on the air here, the government's token Indigenous member, unfortunately, is also out. It doesn't say. I didn't see exactly who fired him. My guess was, if I had to speculate, it was a mutual agreement. But he's out, and that's I think that's unfortunate for basically breaking the quarantine. Then we've also got the minister for, I don't know how you say it, desarrollo productivo, productive development, and the second part of that, economía plural. Any help with that? What's economía plural? Anyway, Wilfredo Rojo, who was the minister of productive development and economía plural, who is a businessman from Santa Cruz, an exporter, worked in the furniture sector, I guess you could say, resigned for reasons that are still unclear, and was replaced by Oscar Ortiz, who we all know who he is, the senator from Santa Cruz, who did terribly and was very disappointed, I think, in the elections in October, who came in fourth place with barely 4%. Let's see. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything here. That's at a national level. At a local level here in Santa Cruz, basically we're in a health crisis at this point. The local health department, called SEDES, has basically really called out the national government, or because of not fulfilling promises on requirements that are needed locally to be able to keep the health sector and the hospitals and clinics from collapsing. It's a, pardon the term, but it's turning into a shit show. I'll leave it at that. Eduardo, going into the numbers on COVID, the confirmed cases, where this is going, where it's been in the past few days, you've come up with a model. I like to look at your graphs and your posts because you do a pretty decent job analyzing the numbers in a way that seems pretty straightforward. So I'll let you go with that, and we'll start there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, basically what I did was look at the Singapore University of Technology and Design model, which is a model that is widely used. I think in Bolivia, or at least in the world, we use 3 or 4 models. They used that reference, one of the GOMERT, the ST, the UD, and there's another one from the University of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 most used models. And I paid attention to the one in Singapore because it's the one that is mostly used here in the community of people who run the numbers. And the first takeaway from that is that it's quite interesting is that they have applied this model to several different types of countries, and the data observed versus the model, which fits quite well. It prescribes a bell curve, basically a 2-month duration of the pandemic, 2 months to maybe 2 months and a week. And the interesting thing is that it's independent of policy, which means that the governments could do anything from open up borders and go merrily their way around, or close up everything like Philippines. It follows the same rule, about 2 months and 1 week. The only thing that changes a little bit is the peak, how much it peaks. So using that model, I try to estimate our numbers based. The data does show that we have aplanado, flattened the proverbial curve, a little bit. But what's weird is that we're picking up really high, which these last couple of days ago, we had a couple of really huge spikes.
Right.
Nonetheless, yesterday's 57 goes back into the graph. I will have a graph. I'll send it over to you guys. And basically, what my model says is that by June the 10th or thereabouts that week, we should see most of the cases go down. We should have had 95% of the cases occur, and such as they prescribed in Spain and other countries, there will be months, probably until October or November, in which we'll have 5 cases a day, 5, 3, 6. So this is over the long term, but most of it, the biggest emergency will happen by June the 10th or 10th to the 15th.
That's going to be the peak about a month from now, according to the model.
No, the peak is right now.
The peak is now. Okay, sorry.
But it will continue developing itself. We will still continue having large numbers, though decreasingly. For example, about a week ago, we had about 70 cases a day. Now, yesterday we had 57. There will still be, 50, 40, but it's still, it will start going down. I think that by June the 10th, we'll start having about 20 to 15 cases a day, which we will call it a lot less, given that we have had 150 a day here in Santa Cruz. And here's the caveat. No, I'm only modeling Santa Cruz because that's where I'm living. That's what I'm interested in. I don't know the shape in the whole Bolivia, but at least here in Santa Cruz, thank goodness, more or less the model is following what's prescribed.
Okay. A question about that. These numbers are based on the official numbers, the numbers released by the government, local governments.
Yes. So
go ahead.
No, they are the official numbers, which of course we'll know that given that we have one of the lowest testing rates in the world, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Nonetheless, what's valid here is the shape of the thing, the tendency. Yeah. So we are assuming that this is kind of a sample of the greater reality. Probably such as they reported in Germany, in Brazil, in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and in LA. There are about 10 times more cases than there is actually reported, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that this is a sample, and if the sample follows a tendency, which is peaking right now and slowly decreasing throughout next month, well, we are, I guess you can make an inference
Mm-hmm.
because of that.
Are there any public officials that are echoing the theory of this model that you're telling us about?
Yes, about a few weeks ago, somebody in the Consejo Científico said that the peak would be around April the 27th, which is more or less the same thing that the
Because
model prescribed, right?
a little
But
bit early.
about a week before, a little
Uh-huh.
bit earlier, we're seeing that it delayed precisely because we're getting to flatten this. We have changed the shape of the curve as we speak because of our efforts, and also the famous Ingeniero Villegas, the guy that predicted
Election fraud.
the election fraud. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
not predicted, but verified it.
Yeah.
He said that there would be around 4,000 confirmed cases, which is also what the model shows, what my model shows. Surprisingly, I didn't fit to it. I just backed into it independently from him, and
Mm-hmm.
says that by the time this thing is over, the government will report between 4,000 to 4,800 confirmed cases. Which, of course, we know that probably that means that there will be 48,000 cases, or times 10,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But at least on what they report, it would be around 4,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying sounds very reassuring. That last question I asked you was kind of based on what you hear in the media, at least from Ceres, from El Doctor Urenda and his team, that makes me worry a lot more in terms of, the way they make it sound. We're just getting started, according to them. And so I'm wondering where that comes from, or what you
Yes.
think that's based on.
Well, one of the things that I think took everybody by surprise was this last week we had 3 or 4 super huge peaks. I mean, off the charts. So
Mhm.
I guess it will take one more week to know whether those were isolated events, something inherent to, say, let's say there wasn't enough testing. For example, one of the peaks was because it was Primero de Mayo, it was a holiday, and the lab workers were not working. So the next day and the next time that they returned, it huge. I mean, they reported the numbers for 3 days in one day, and it looked as if we were going to die, but it wasn't that. But what's worrisome is that this repeated itself 2 or 3 times, which shouldn't have happened, and I don't know what the story behind those numbers. So that's, I think, what freaked out everybody out, because it seemed like it shoot up uncontrollably. But yesterday's observation data point is more actual towards the trend. So this week is going to be interesting because it will define the cap. If we continue to have these super huge observations, and yes, this thing is running amok and we're the next Ecuador. But if it continues to go as this 57, 55, 50 type of thing, then we have hit the peak. I guess that's what threw everybody out. Those 3 or 4 super high peaks that are unexplained. One of them can be explained because of the holiday, the other one's not. And so I can see why everybody was freaked out, and me too. I wonder too. So this week will either confirm that the government and this STDU model are more or less on track, or that we have somehow changed modes, that something broke and it shoot up, and we are entering into a different type of distribution. Because up to this point, I was doing an analysis. We were growing at a quick, fast rate, but not exponential. It was
Hmm.
polynomial, and it was quite fast, quite steep, but not exponential. But if we continue repeating this super high, then that would mean that we made it into an exponential curve, which is something I think happened in Peru, and things got out of control. We'll
And
see.
I think in Brazil as well. I've
Yes.
been a little less. I've been a little detached from the news, but trying to keep as much attention or pay as much attention as time will allow these days. But yeah, I guess we'll see. And the last thing I want to make clear, you said this is regardless of whatever policies are put in place in terms of quarantining or not, opening things
Yes.
up or not. And there's various countries that have followed this curve regardless.
Yes, this is quite interesting. They apply this model to New Zealand, to Brazil, to the United States, to Sweden, to Spain, to Italy. I think Argentina is there too. To several different countries, they have it on their webpage. It's really nice. It's the graph with their prediction and the timeline, and it follows the same shape. It's about 2 months and about a week. It picks out. The only thing that changes is how bad it picks out, and well, that depends on how tough the measures are. Obviously for the US and for Sweden it's really skewed high, but with other countries it's skewed low. And so that was the quite the interesting thing. That's why I was thinking it doesn't matter what Angelica Sosa does and we were pondering this with another guy who's following the numbers, and we think is the following. First of all, though all of those measures have limited reach, as you have seen yourself, and I have seen from my trips around the city, people will tend to do whatever they want, anyhow. So you can dictate a full quarantine or whatever else. People will do whatever they want. I was surprised when, for instance, Duterte from Philippines said, whoever goes out, I'll shoot them, and people went out and got shot. So people, that's human nature. They will do whatever they want. And the second part is that the virus is extremely infectious, and it's the same virus either here or in Argentina or in Ecuador and everywhere else. Is the same.
Right.
So it can change the nature of. So people are the same, and the virus is the same. So policies have a limited reach, and I think maybe therefore that is why it follows about the same shape of curve.
Okay.
So that means that if the logic behind having a quarantine is that people don't go out because if you go out, you get more infected. An argument against the quarantine is that if you are in your house, everybody is not infecting each other, the day you open the door, everybody will get infected. That's only logical. But it doesn't seem to be logical according to the Singapore analysis, right? Because under the Singapore analysis, if everybody stays at home during 2 months and 1 week, then you open the door, nobody will get infected because the curve will already have held down, right?
Well, what it's saying is that you can mandate people to stay at home. People still gonna go out. People still gonna get infected somehow. That I think that's what it's saying more things would magically go out in 2 weeks. So it's saying it's assuming, I think, underlining implicitly that infection and contagious will still happen regardless of whatever. No one, and there my conjecture is because people are gonna do whatever they want to do anyhow. I think that's what it is.
But listen to Marcelo Nava has said we are going to get over with this when 80% of the people are infected. That's exactly what the Swedish government is saying. We're going to get over with this when 80% of people will be infected. And the Swedish are actually going after getting infected 80% of the people.
Herd immunity. Is that what it's called?
We lost communication?
No, we're here. No, I said herd immunity, I think is the term they're using.
Yeah, that's the English term. But the Swedish are after infecting everybody. So right now, I think yesterday or the day before, in Stockholm, they almost had 50% of the people infected. I think that's a fact at this point. But so if that's the case, then it's not coherent, right? Because what you need is 80% of the people infected, not wait for 2 months and a week, because it makes a difference. You know, if everybody, I understand what you say. If you tell them to stay, they won't stay. Yeah, but in Bolivia, we have seen in Google that people did stay. At least a great majority of the people did stay at home, although there were a couple that didn't, or a percentage that didn't. So we still have, I don't know what, but a long way until we reach that 80% of people infected, because I think that's what would matter. But I know that one would have to be a specialist in public health, because basically what I'm saying is you need 80% of people infected in order to the curve to come down, because then there's no infection, unless there's a miracle in between, because you need everybody infected in order for the curve to come down. But it seems that the Singapore people don't think that way. But let's see what will happen. That's the challenge.
I think what we have to disambiguate or differentiate is that there is the health emergency versus the fact that the run-of-the-mill infections. You know, you will still have several months of people getting infected. You know, for example, they have predicted that people will still get coronavirus in Spain until October or November, but it won't be a health crisis. You know, they will probably reach 80% over there, but it will probably reach by November. You know, but they are beginning to de-quarantine or phase 1 deconfinement now, because the bulk, the hospital clogging is more or less easing down, you know, and that's the difference. You know, we will still see huge or considerable numbers. The thing is that it won't be so huge as 150 a day. That's the difference. That's the difference between having a whole panic emergency, you know, people dying in Bolivia, well, at 5 or 6 a day, versus, you know, 1 every week will die for the remainder of the year until we all get herd immunity and it's fine. You know, Sweden is interesting because they are all doing it at once. They're writing that check now, cash. They're paying cash for it now, you know, and I think that's the difference. The only difference at the end, and some people really don't like to listen to this, is how quickly you incur in those deaths. That's it. That's the difference. Whether you do it now,
that's what I was just
Sweden
gonna.
or versus.
That's what I was just gonna say. Sorry to interrupt you, but
go for it.
It's kind of difficult to articulate, but that you just did. I think you just hit it on the head. And it's basically what I was gonna say is that the people that are most likely to show symptoms and get real sick, and who have lower a weakened immune system, are probably going to get sicker before those that don't. You know, regardless of the quarantine or not, because being in a quarantine doesn't mean you're 100% immune, unless you literally isolate 100%, which nobody's doing. People are still going to the grocery stores. People are still going to the banks, still going next to the store next door, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even people insist that they might be following the quarantine guidelines, but that doesn't mean they're being 100% careful of assuring they don't get the virus, because this is something that happens at a microscopic level. These are, what do you call them? Microscopic particles, I guess. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of us have already been exposed to it, or may have already gotten it and have been asymptomatic. Is that the word? And nobody ever found out. And so what Eduardo just said is that, you know, hits it on the head for me, at least under this theory, that Sweden has basically, you know, the people that were going to die or more likely to die are just dying earlier than later. And that makes sense to me, at least based on this model and what you can infer in the nature of the virus itself, I guess, and how contagious it is.
But listen to this, Paul. The point is the time, you know, because the curve is supposed to go down in 2 weeks, in 2 months and a week. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many people died in Sweden?
No.
Do you have an idea? Okay, okay. Sweden is a good comparison with Bolivia because we almost have the same number of inhabitants. In Sweden, there are like 10 million and a fraction. In Bolivia, there are like 11 million inhabitants. So the comparison is not too irrational. It's fairly reasonable to compare them. At this point, what you have in Sweden is 3,000 and something dead people.
Okay.
In Bolivia, you have 109 or 100, at the most 120 dead people.
Yeah.
So under your interpretation of the Singapore curve, we will have 3,000 and something dead people, not in the 2 months and a half, but in whatever time it takes, I don't know, 10 years. It's inconsistent because the curve goes down quickly in 2 months, in 1 week it goes. But have all the 3 dead people will occur from this point until 2030. But that's I don't think that doesn't sound too consistent with the impact of a pandemic, right?
There is a statistical concept called kurtosis, which means the area of the curve on the tails. And I'm thinking Sweden just incurred the whole price soon and have a pretty small tail. I guess their deaths or contagious from here on, they will be lower and lower and lower, versus we will have still continued infections, but not too much so as to obstruct the health system, which is what they were saying. So yes, we will have 3,000 deaths as Sweden. It's just that they
but that doesn't configure a bell curve. Then.
Okay, but hold on a second. The bell curve is showing the number of cases, not the mortality rate, not the number of deaths.
It shows the tendency. It shows the tendency.
Yeah.
Because the infected people have a relationship with the number of deaths.
Yeah. The thing is that the bell curve has it's a canonical model, but that's different in shapes. As it differs with the standard deviation, it differs the amount of also the skewness and also the amount of tail that it has on both sides. So it won't be the same shape as Sweden, but it more or less be that shape. So we're not talking an identical bell curve as Sweden, nor as with Brazil but more or less it follows that it has that behavior. So yes, you're right in that it's not going to be exactly the same. It's going to be a more.
It will be stretched in 10 years until we reach the 3,000 dead, right?
Yes, very much so. They have just chosen.
So it'll be almost flat at the top.
Yes. Okay. Which it's when looking at it, if you look at it with no feelings, one could say, Sweden, good luck, you did a good job, Sweden, But then you see the human toll, the cost, the tragedy. It's horrible, And I was paying attention to the Sweden thing, and they're having some internal political strife because of that, because they're now witnessing the cost of it, And they're saying, which is horrible. This is horrible. They've been called into question. The lead epidemiologist is the Andrew Tegnell, I think is his name. And whereas the beginning they said, bravo, this is wonderful, you're a savior. I saw a video where somebody was doing they're tattooing his face on his shoulder, basically. And now when they're realizing the numbers of death, they're now really scared, But we will see those 3,000 deaths. We probably will see them in a year, hopefully, But no one is getting rid of that, basically. Unless
3,000 in a year, 3,000 in a year, Eduardo, would mean 300 in a month.
About
that's a trembling thing, because we had up to this point 120 people died since March.
But we
2 months. So what you're previewing is that we're going to have 300 people dead in a month, which means much more than we already had from March until. So the curve cannot be going down. It's still going steeply up until it turns at some point.
or will we have a longer,
I think a year was an arbitrary number you just threw out. That's
yeah.
No, because 3,000 dead is a lot of dead, you know. If you divide that by 12, you're in 300 or something. So that's what I mean.
I don't know. The way I see the reports coming from sedes here in Santa Cruz, my suspicion is we'll see the death toll rise very quickly over the next couple weeks. I don't know.
Yes, because there is a maybe 5 days to 2 week lag between confirming a case and the worst parts of it. Yes. So yeah, I mean, we're now hitting the peak of, say, those 158 that got infected or that were reported infected a couple of days ago. You know, percentage of those, 5% of those will go into ICU and probably worse in about a week or so from now. So yes, you're right. We're having a lag.
Okay. So, I mean, that 5 deaths a day or whatever we're likely to see that change rather abruptly.
True.
Because I don't know, deviating a little bit and getting away from the numbers and the models, what I keep saying is that, I've kind of lost my faith in using the number of confirmed cases as a way to measure how we're doing with this, just because the test rate is so low, it's ridiculous. And I kind of what I try to gauge basically is the confirmed death rate or the confirmed number of deaths and the general feel of what the health sector is saying. And the number of deaths is increasing a little bit at this point from what it was in weeks prior, but the at least here in Santa Cruz, they seem to they're starting to freak out, and that worries the hell out of me. Because
I think yes, people freak out because they're not prepared. When I started seeing these numbers, I started preparing my family, my wife and everybody else, to see these numbers, to see 200 up to 247, I think was the peak of infected per day, and to expect those a commensurate amount of people dead. I think people, the media, and I guess people too, don't want to face the facts, and they, even when Ministro Navajas told us as it is, there will be 7 million people infected, people got angry at him for saying things, but
yeah,
it's not unexpected, and we should probably come to terms with it. And I'm not saying that we should be worried, but we should not be worried, but it shouldn't come as a surprise at all.
Mhm.
And yes, about this really quickly, about losing faith on the numbers, I too lose faith on the numbers. I don't know if you've seen this news. I thought it was fake, but then it was reported by a serious media that the president of Tanzania applied the COVID-19 test to a papaya, a goat, and a quail,
Jesus.
and
And they came
the three of
positive.
them came positive. You know, and once you start looking at things such as, for example, the death, I was looking at how Italy versus Germany account for the death, and there are several differences as well. For instance, there was a guy who got sick in Mairana, from Samaipata, a few miles over there, and they took so long to take him from Samaipata, from Mairana to here to Santa Cruz, and even when here they couldn't admit him immediately, that he passed away. So did he pass away from COVID, or did he pass away from malpractice or bad management? So how do you account for that? And for several cases such as that happen, so the numbers are quite. We can pretend we can derive some information from the numbers. We have to always take them with a grain of salt because of these things.
Yeah. Well, I made a post reel earlier on about that. Our mortality, the death rate seemed to be double the average for Latin America, like 6%, if you just compared the deaths to the number of confirmed cases. And the kind of the point I made at that point, I think, was that if the virus doesn't kill you, then the lack of the system. Thank you. The system is going to kill you.
But that's true everywhere, Paul. That's true in the United States too. It's true everywhere. People don't die because of the virus. People die because the system fails. Either you don't reach the system because they don't accept it because they change you from one hospital to another, or because they inject you with a respirator. And once you're injected with a respirator, you've seen that the risk of dying is like 50%, not because of the virus, because of the respirator. So if you want to get so sophisticated and say who died with the virus, that's really that will be a big task for humanity as a whole, because most people are dying because of the system, because either they cannot reach the system because the tests are prolonged in the time that they come out with the results, and you're dead before the results come out. And then once the results come out, you're accepted in the clinica, and you go into intensive care unit, and they plug you in the respirator, and you die because of the respirator. But that's true in London, that's true in La Paz, that's true in Santa Cruz, that's true everywhere. It's hard to distinguish exactly who is dying out of the virus.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, but I'm more worried about the system killing me here than in the States. Let's just say.
Definitely. For me, for instance, is a concern that the fact that the AGMED, the agency of the government that has that regulates pharmaceuticals, has prohibited people from using ivermectin. Who are they to tell me that I can do it? If there are several, even in Cochabamba, there is a group of doctors that prove ivermectin on somebody who has COVID with positive effects, this and everybody else in the world. And ultimately, if I want to run the risk as an individual, who are they to tell me that they're not? It almost seems like a decision that is, low in the upside and big on the downside, because if I take something that I don't need, oh well. But if that thing that could save me, they disallow me from taking it, then they have just produced me a damage to me,
Mm-hmm.
But that's a legal concept throughout the world, Eduardo. Drugs are admitted legally by a country or not admitted. You cannot go to any country and say, I'm going to take this because it does me good. And the state, whether it be the state of India or the state of Bolivia, say, no, you cannot take it because it's not admitted in this country. You take it anyways. The world will be chaos if that happens.
In other countries, but in Bolivia, people do it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but still, it's illegal. You don't do what's illegal.
I guess what I would like to know is a better rationalization for why they are disallowing it. Yes, there should be some guidelines. I've seen some crazy things happen here in Bolivia, such as importing things, contrabando of drugs that you're not supposed to take. But if there is evidence, I don't know why we wouldn't even run a state-sponsored test. Why a wider state-sponsored test to better understand it?
Yeah, I don't understand you very well, but what I'm saying is that in any state of the world, not only in Bolivia, you take the medicine that is admitted by the state, by the government. You don't take the medicine that is not admitted by the government. Under what standards does the state admit or not admit? I don't know about that, because I don't know who's testing or not testing or how do they test them. But basically, in any state, civilized state of the world, you take medicines that are admitted by that state. You can't take something else because you think it's good for you.
Let's not forget that the medicine is registered so it is already admitted
for animals.
And for general use, Erland Bacadíes, the doctor, has prescribed it, he said, since 1991. So it can be administered to humans and has been administered, at least according to this doctor, since 1991. But they're disallowing it for it to be used specifically.
But what I understand is the medicine is for animals. Whether somebody administered to human beings since 1991 is a whole different issue. But what I understand is
not really, because if a doctor's writing a prescription for it for a person, that means there are legal uses for it on people under the existing laws.
Unless the doctor doctor prescribes something aside from the law. And
No,
that can
no.
happen.
Well, that could happen, and
Sure.
surely in Bolivia everything happens. No, but there are human dosages. For example, in Republiquetas Street, they do still to this point they retail the human version of ivermectina on droplets on Tero. And many, let's not forget, many of the drugs that we have do have animal and human
Purpose.
dosages and forms. For example, the amoxicillin and ampicillin, they're widely used for cattle. We use it as well. You know, it's just different dosage for per unit of measure, per unit of weight, body weight that we have. So it's interesting for me to know that even given that the drug has been administered and it has some history of being used by humans, why inhibit the range of options that a doctor has to use it, you know? But yeah, I do understand that that if we didn't have any rules, or if we have too much flexibility on the rules, it could be lent itself to be misused. And goodness knows that in Bolivia, that probably does happen, and it probably will happen.
Yeah, no, all I'm saying is that in every state of the world, there are laws, there are rules in order to use medication. So that's it, you know. In Bolivia, they're not allowing to use this because of some reason. I don't know what the reason is, but obviously there is a reason for that. We should ask Mr. Navajas for that because he's the one that prohibited it.
We'll have him on next
my
week.
experience with Ahemed. Yeah, we should. My experience from Ahemed is very negative. I can give you an example. About 6 months ago, I was trying to get a permit to import agua destilada 10 milliliter agua, you know, water for injection.
Distilled
And they
water.
sent me, yeah, distilled water for injection. You know, that water that you buy an ampoule so that you
Yep,
can
yep.
mix it with some, yeah. And they told me you should justify this new molecule. You should justify the use of this new molecule. I'm thinking water for injection is not a new molecule by any standard. I mean, it's just water. It's distilled water. You know, give me the name of the person who is doing this. Turns out it was just off the mill of the university, little bureaucrat doctor just signing up some papers in their desk in La Paz, and she just, for whatever odd reason, didn't realize that water for injection is just water for injection. It's something that we've been using for the last 50, 60, 70 years here, you know. And so I had to justify that water is not a new molecule in Bolivia, not in the world. And I can tell you this times 10 every time that I try to register a new medicine to bring in here is the same struggle. So I have little faith on Ahemed, so maybe that's why anything that they say, I always firstly I'm against it, and I'm looking for justification, because in my previous experience, their first word to everything is no, and then you know, then no, and because I said so, and then I had to reason with them why it's nuts. It's really nuts, but oh well, that's just my rant on bureaucracy.
No, but it's good that you talk about it because I think you're right. I think that bureaucrats are bad people everywhere in the world. But my point is, you cannot. That's the law, right? What you're explaining is that you win because once you explain, you get understood, and then people reason, and then they admit whatever you're trying to import into Bolivia. That's pretty good because finally reason stands, right? But in this issue that we're speaking about, I know that this is detailed, but I'm a legalist, right? You cannot spread around the world say, why can I can't take this, even though the state doesn't allow it. I don't care because they're so stupid, and I'm smarter than the state, so we can all take it. That's a position that's very antagonistic against the state of law. Any place in the world, I think that's just irreverent, you know. But don't worry, my worries are legal worries.
No, true, and it's true, and the regulations
that's
have
chaos, because if everybody behaves like that, then you have a chaotic situation.
But Eduardo's got an advantage over the average citizen, in that he works in the field and he probably knows. He does his homework a little more. But anyway.
Yeah, but that's because everybody has an argument to do that, you know, not only in this field, in any field.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of chaos, I think, and that's the description that Eduardo is doing. This is the description of Bolivian history, of Latin American history, since we became freed from the Spanish. You know, everybody does whatever they feel like doing because they think they have the truth on their side, and that the state has to do with that because we have the truth, and that's it. You know, that's the chaos. That's the reason people go out to the streets and walk around and don't take care because they have the truth. They say, "I'm right. I can just walk around and fuck the state because the state doesn't know what it's doing." Yeah, that's
True. It's
the reason.
it's very much.
Latin America is like that, you know, and I think that's exactly the opposite of
Ah,
the Asian
but
custom. You know, the Asian customs are obedience to the law, obedience to what the state does or says, although it can be wrong. There's a culture of obedience in Latin America. There's no culture of obedience for anybody. You know, nobody obeys anybody, and that's chaos. And I think that's. But then again, you know, this is a very philosophical discussion
Yes.
because how many people are dead? How many people are dead in Sweden? How many people are dead in Bolivia? We're way off better, and we do whatever the fuck we want. You know, you know, and we still have 120 people died in Sweden. They have 3,000 people dying when we have the same amount of people on Earth. So it's very relative. It's just pointing out an issue that I think is interesting. You know, people in Bolivia and Latin America tend to have a law on their mouth. And that's disobedience. That's absolute disobedience, but it works. Countries are developing like that.
Ernesto, you pointed. I'm gonna, if Paula, if you allow me,
go
quick
ahead.
point.
Go
You know,
ahead.
they in Colombia, in Bogota, they tested 239 people in the streets in situación de calle. You know, beggars, homeless, and out of those 239, 0 came with positive COVID. You know, so this is one of something a friend of mine who lives in Colombia was saying. Check this out. You know, so you would think that people who live in the streets dirty with no access to food, no access to anything, they would have, you know, they would be the first ones to be wiped out. You know, at the very least they would have it. You know, and it's so nuts that they don't. And I saw this yesterday. It was a huge contrast. You know, I was driving through Cañoto Avenue yesterday, and in one side, in the median side, there were the homeless, and they were just in the floor, sleeping, dirty, and whatever else. The other side of the sidewalk, yeah, the classic Cañoto style thing. And in the other side, the people doing the line to enter the Fidalga and Hipermaxi, and they were, you know, all covered up with masks and barbijos and gloves and whatever else, you know. And it was nuts because of the, you know, and somebody also postulated this. What's happening? Because we have so many homeless people. They should be, you know, we should be seeing these death rates skyrocket. You know, we should be picking off the bodies of the street, and nothing. It does nothing. Why? Why so? Why if in Bolivia we're so nuts that we do whatever the hell we want? Pardon me, the world. You know, we only have 140 or so deaths. And in Sweden, that have everything else, you know, all the all 3,000. I just don't understand it.
I have two theories there.
Yeah.
Two possibilities there. One is that they've got a stronger immune system because you know what they say about that: kids who are allowed to play in the dirt and get muddy and, you know, create a stronger immune system.
Get sick.
Or the rubber cement should be looked at as a vaccine or as a as a way to not that everybody on the street is sniffing glue, but
that was the theory of the Chuño guy. Remember?
Chuño man.
The Chuño man. That's his theory. Sure. Basically, that's his theory. You know, that's the whole message behind him. You know, he's strong because he's a street guy. You know, street people are strong because they're infested with everything and they have antibodies.
There could be something to it. That it is an interesting point. I saw you post that, Eduardo, and I think it should be looked at. It's certainly interesting. I wonder if that's the case all over the world. We're 50 minutes in.
Why not? That's probably the case all over the world. Yes. Why not? Bogotanians are not Martians. They're just humans, you know?
No.
Yeah. Sure. That is probably the case all over the world. Yeah.
it'd be interesting to look at a place like Los Angeles where there's tens of thousands of homeless people on the streets.
But those are weak homeless.
What's that?
Those are weak homeless people.
Ah.
Sure, sure. Have you ever seen it? But you're an American out of the States. Americans, when they travel abroad, no matter where they go, they drink a glass of water and they get sick out of the stomach.
Mhm.
Because they live in a very healthy place. You know, they're a place where there's no infections. It's perfect. You know, so you don't get sick. Once you get out of the bubble, you get sick. You know, so yes, homeless people in Los Angeles are not equivalent to the homeless people in Bogota. That's for certain. Of course.
That's another discussion. I'm not going to go there right now.
I've
Let's
seen
see.
a homeless guy in Miami pull out his iPhone. That's
Sure. They're luxurious homeless people, you know, of course. That's the bourgeois homeless. It's not the same. You can't compare that, man. Okay.
I'm not. I don't know. We'll leave that for another day. Let's move along here. We've got all these. I think I'm not going to say interim government. Our current administration has kind of had an awful week. They seem to be having a major crisis between all the destitutions or firings and people resigning and people, at least here in Santa Cruz, the local authorities calling them out for mismanagement. Where do you guys want to go? Ernesto, what do you want to hit on? We didn't talk about it, or I didn't mention at the beginning either, that El Alto seems to, I saw that video of I guess it would be called the neighborhood. What do you call that in English? Like the neighborhood the
Junta Vecinal.
Yeah, but it's the Federation of Junta Vecinales. How do you say that? The United Federation of El Alto neighborhoods. There we go.
Something like that.
Yeah. Basically saying they're not taking this anymore, and that they're going back out on the streets, more or less, right?
Because they understand the Singapore bell curve.
They've probably been looking at it.
They interpret it as it doesn't matter what, you know, we just get out of here. And they're probably right, because they're interpreting Mr. Navajas' word.
True, that 60% are going to get sick anyhow.
Mr. Navajas has established a contradiction within the government. He is on the Swedish theory, and the government is on the more conservative theory of locking everybody up, as if that would make a difference. It'd make a difference on velocity, but
I think that was important. You know, I mean, what you guys were talking about just a few minutes ago, that Sweden's had 3,000 deaths thus far. Can you imagine if we were in a situation trying to deal with potential case here in Bolivia? You know, the quarantine has definitely had its place, and I'm a strong believer that it is, at least up until now. I'm not going to go and make any predictions about what's going to happen a week or 2 weeks from now. I've learned not to do that. But at least up until now, it certainly has seemed to help keep us from being in a situation that's total chaos and not manageable. Whether it needs to be loosened or whether it's sustainable is an entirely different issue. The sustainability issue. And I think that's what we're seeing now, is that what we talked about, I don't know if it was before we started recording or not, that people are starting to get desperate, starting to, I don't want to say, if they're becoming careless because they think if they haven't gotten sick until now, they're not going to. But I think we're seeing a shift in the tendency towards acceptance of what the central government is mandating at this point. That's for sure.
Resistance.
Yes.
Civil resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Uncivilized resistance.
And I don't know. I don't know if that's really worth talking about, because we can only speculate on what's going to happen because of that. What do you guys think?
That was a good
Well,
face.
the gremialistas said that they were gonna go out and protest on Monday, right? And then I think
Here in
that
Santa
the people
Cruz?
from the no in El Alto,
Okay.
in El Alto, they said they were gonna be here in Santa Cruz. The choferes, the drivers, they are demanding, or they will post a protest that to demand that they will be given another bonus or something like that. I know that this is due for Monday. So I think this coming week we will see certain civil arrest, from the gremialistas, from the choferes, etc. Because from the same process that you mentioned, people are running out of money and also running out of patience.
Yeah, and they're not getting their bonus. At least there's been a lag, or what's the word? It's they're postponing or pushing back the date on handing out the bono universal, the 500 bolivianos
500 Bolivianos.
per person who doesn't have a fixed or basically a guaranteed fixed income.
No income. Mhm.
Yeah. Beyond, I'm curious as to see how that's going to be, what the central government's reaction is going to be to that. And you're also seeing it, at a municipal level, and at a state level, or departamental, that there's a lot of discord and they're not coordinating, and there's not cooperation or agreement at all in terms of at those three levels, national, state, and municipal, in terms of how to decide whether or not they're going to loosen up or not loosen up the restrictions at this point. And I'm interested in seeing where that goes. This government, up until now, the national or central government, has been pretty heavy-handed and strict, and I don't know, imponente, authoritarian, etc., in terms of dealing with this whole situation. But it seems like we're at the brink of it, them losing control.
I am from what I have observed. One thing that worries me is that law enforcement is exhausted. I've been out in the streets for the last 3 weeks, and at the beginning I saw police and military police and armed forces in almost every corner, checking for documents and whatever else. The number of arrests were high. It was heavy-handed, such as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Here recently, Paul and Ernesto, I've seen just nuts, contra ruta, driving through red lights and
Yep.
whatever else, with police over there. They just, I think that such as what happened with 21F, we have taxed the police so much for so long that they have just gave up, or at least they are now tending to only critical cases.
Mm-hmm.
The other day, there was a party, una borrachera here next street. I tried to call 4 times the police, 110, nothing, no answer, nothing. And so I'm afraid that maybe whatever the government at all levels decide, what kind of coercive pressure or would they have if the armed forces and police are just exhausted from having to keep us all in for the last 50 days? That's my worry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that the police guys are not implementing their measures as strict as they were before, because they're the infected ones.
True.
They are getting all the coronaviruses. So come on, if I would be a policeman, it'd be very hard for me to go out to the street and do my job, because I'm exposed as anybody, more than anybody else, comparatively speaking. So I think that's a natural reaction from the police. But on the other hand, on the political side of this, I don't think the government has been from the beginning imposing anything against the will of the people. I think it pretty much goes after. first comes the will of the people, then comes the government. Don't forget that at the beginning, it wasn't the government that decided for the lockdown to be total. The total lockdown was dictated by the
By Sosa
municipal government
here in
by
Santa
Sosa
Cruz.
here.
Right. She se adelantó.
So
Uh-huh.
so there was like a wave in Santa Cruz that should happen, you know. So the government all of a sudden says, yeah, you know, she's right, and then they approved the total lockdown because they were not going to do it, and they were not going to do it because they know that people have to eat. So that contradiction between eating and being locked down is a contradiction here and everywhere in the world. So I have been watching that from the beginning. The government is not taking the initiative. The government is following the initiative of the people or what it perceives are the people. So now what I think is that the protest in El Alto and probably other protests here in Santa Cruz are going to shape what the government is going to do. The government is not going to go against the will of the people, because if the government says, you know, hey, we have to be in a lockdown and all these people are marching in order to eat and to go to the markets, they're not going to go against it. Because they can't, because they don't have the force in order to keep the people locked up. They don't have the means to do it. As Eduardo says, the policemen are not following those orders, so it won't happen. My take is that the government is just going to follow. If they see that by next week, by next Thursday, people are more willing to go out because there's going to be a deeper financial crisis, it'll probably open up and say, you know, now we are not in the emergency situation, we are in the moderate situation or whatever it's called, you know, and they'll just open the door a little bit wider. I think the government is going to follow that. They're not going to go against the will of the people. And at this stage of the situation, the people is not Sosa. The people are the juntas vecinales del Alto, the people of the transportistas in Santa Cruz. The people are the proletariat, not the bourgeoisie. Sosa is the bourgeoisie, and she started with this whole wave. But now I think the proletariat are going to take the initiative here. Plus, remember, the mass is following the proletariat. So the mass is after whatever the people in the Villa Primero de Mayo and all, what they want, the gremialistas, you know. So if the government stands against them, they're going to government, because so I think that this is a very political game from now on. It has always been, but it'll be more now because the economic crisis is here and people have to live, and they have to play it by ear. You know, they have to open the door a little bit and see how many people die that week. If too many people die that week, then they'll shut the door again, and so on and so forth. But that's the game. Pretty much. Yeah, they're going to play by ear politics. This is politics. It's not science.
But my feeling a little bit is that it's sort of a black and white issue. In what sense? In that I was very surprised at the beginning to see how much people really seem to be following the rules, right? At least where I live, there was nothing on the street, no cars. It was a ghost town, and I live on one of the main avenues in the city.
Right.
And if they say, well, this is strict and this, and you have to, and they started fining people and throwing people in jail for 8 hours or a day or whatever, and taking their cars away and stuff like that. Then people said, oh shit, you know, the authorities are serious about this, and people were following the rules. And as you start lightening up in terms of imposing the rules, then people become emboldened and start going out. And once you open that door, it's real hard to shut it back up, because the police are tired. They're scared because they're the ones getting sick. They're underpaid. We all know that. And once people just start going out and doing whatever they want, which is becoming more and more in the case, then they just give up, which is what we're seeing now. And so you both make interesting points about it. You know, the government following based on the perception of what the will of the people is. And But if we open up, is it going to be easy to close it back up if we start seeing people die en masse? I guess that depends on if people get scared enough seeing something like that. I hope it doesn't happen. But yeah, that's why it's real hard to say what's going to happen a week or 2 weeks from now. I don't know. I don't know.
It'd be interesting to know once the dead people start being reported from the 4 or 5 peaks that we have seen last week. Whether that will drive people to become scared. One thing that I know is that when I was going to Plan 3000, there were days, there were times where I saw no one wearing barbijo. I mean, no one. I'm not saying this is as an exaggeration or maybe in a block. No, I drove for miles and miles, and no one was wearing a barbijo. No one was social distancing. And last week, yesterday, and the day before, when I went there, everybody was wearing a barbijo. What happened since? I think that people have maybe they care less what the government thinks, but they started seeing the reported death, and people start becoming scared. So we will see also if the will of the people change as we see the new numbers being reported with these dead people. Especially as we have seen that we are started to running out of ventilators, respirators. We only have 3 available, as Urenda reported before checking out. And so I probably will see more of those preventable deaths, over this next coming week, and see if this dampens a little bit the impetus, the force to work. We shall see.
Anything else you guys want to touch on here? We're almost an hour and 10 minutes in. There's other things to talk about. I'm leaving it open to you guys.
I think it's a lot.
And besides, we're hitting prime, or what do you call it, prime time or rush hour in terms of internet internet bandwidth use, and so to avoid connection issues. That's you guys are happy with concluding here?
Yes,
I think that's the will of the people.
That's
the people are exhausted.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you
Stay
so much.
safe.
Thank you very much.
Have a good week. And
Sure. You guys too. Eduardo, don't forget to send me those graphs. I'll see if I can incorporate them into the video when I edit this.
Sure thing. I'll log in and I'll update them with the data from yesterday and send them over to you.
Awesome. Have an excellent weekend,
Take
everybody.
care.
Take care.
bye-bye.
Happy
Take it
Sunday.
easy.
See you.
Thank you. You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.